Welcome to the first of the afternoon sessions. My name is Carolyn Reynolds. My background is drama, television production drama, sort of varied background, ITV, working on independent productions for the BBC and Channel 4. But it's not me that we're talking about today. It's actually about Red Production Company and Emily and Alison, who are going to introduce themselves in a minute and tell us an awful lot more about this very, very successful drama production company. The function of today very much is about sort of trying to open the doors and give some of those, the minutiae and secrets perhaps that are perhaps not so widely known about how successful drama production companies work. So I'm hoping we can bring some of that out into the open today, but also allow you to ask as many questions as you want. One small housekeeping point is that we were such a wonderful audience this morning that sometimes cameras were unable to get to you or microphones to get to you in time. So if you put your hands up, could you wait until the microphone is there before you ask your question? And that just allows us to get a lovely shot of you as well. So it means we don't have random voices coming from elsewhere and a cameraman looking where you are. So without further ado, I'm sure most of you know an awful lot about Red Production Company because it is one of the most successful in Britain, and it's a fantastic organisation set up by Nikki Schindler. Back in, I discovered 1998, which of course makes me feel very old, but there we go. Wonderful selection of writers work for Red Production Company, probably one of the main assets, and as a result, of course, it's always about the script. So these things get made and they're brilliant, they do really well. The list is a long one, which is why I'm looking down because I have to read it. But the most recent ones that you will probably recognise the names of are Happy Valley, Last Tango in Halifax and Scott and Bailey, all written by Sally Wainwright. But there are others that Red are making for the BBC and for other companies and other broadcasters rather. And also, of course, it's all started back in the late 90s with Nikki making a wonderful cult hit, Queer as Folk, written by Russell T Davies. So there's a long track record of history. And of course, I'm now going to bring it to the present day, two very talented ladies who are sitting next to me. I'm going to start with you, Emily. Would you mind giving us a little sort of potted description of what you do at Red, but also what you did before, as in how you got into the business?
Yes, I started work at the BBC. My entry-level job was a finance assistant at Watchdog. I've since moved into drama, knowing that's what I wanted to do, to produce drama, and moved to work in independents, work at ITV, and I've been at Red now for 7 years. Started in development at Red, script editing, and I'm now producing drama that we're making.
Excellent. And Alison, how did you step into it?
I'm, unlike Emily, who's staff at Red, I'm freelance, but a lot of my work is at Red because they're so busy. I did a film and media degree and then went into some factual programming before moving into drama, and worked my way up through the levels from production secretary to production coordinator and now line producer.
Excellent. Now I think without further ado we should take a quick look at one of Red's most recent productions.
If you're insisting on a Saturday slot, you're looking at 5 months away.
I think sooner rather than later.
Are either of you divorced?
No.
No.
Widowed.
And you're both regular churchgoers, obviously.
Well, we have been in the past.
So you're not regular churchgoers now?
No.
When did you last go to church?
Christmas? 1977?
What about you, Mrs. Dawson?
About the same.
So why do you want God's blessing if you don't go to church? I'm just interested.
We thought he might like the trade.
Miserable bitch. I mean, no wonder folk don't go. Well, we could live off at Brush.
Ah, but then you wouldn't be Mrs. Buttershaw.
No, and I fancy having a do. I want to buy a hat.
Oh, we could find another vicar. I bet they're not all like that.
Nah, she's put me off. That's it. Now with me in the church. End of. Good night, Vienna. I have left the building.
Well, where would you like to get wed? Because, I mean, you can get wed anywhere now, you know.
Oh, somewhere classy.
Oh, yeah.
South Ourham Hall.
South Ourham Hall.
Oh, I used to love South Ourham Hall. Is it still there?
Yeah, as far as I know.
They've not mucked it up?
No, I think it's just as creepy as it ever was.
Excellent. Last Tango in Halifax was a wonderful series written by Sally Wainwright. It'd be nice just to talk a little bit about, I know this first series, who's worked on what, isn't it? Actually, that importance really, it's more about sort of experiences from it. Somebody once said, how do you sell a show with two 70-somethings in the lead? How do you sell a show?
Very difficult process, I can tell you. Sally had always had this idea because it's based on her mum. And her mum met someone in later life and fell in love and got married. And she'd always talked about it within a context of some sort. So maybe it was going to be a mum in another show that we were working on, and then it didn't quite work. And she ended up just wanting to write these characters. And from memory, it was a few years ago, I think she just went ahead and wrote a script. And as I'm sure you can imagine, any Sally script that you get is just a joy to read the first draft of. And we spoke to, forgive me if the order's slightly wrong, we spoke to BBC, one of the commissioning editors there initially, and sent them the script. And it was just too old. They just didn't want old people in a drama, unfortunately. So we spoke to the commissioning editor at ITV, and unfortunately it was the same answer. It just didn't want old people, unfortunately. And we didn't feel it was really right to speak to Channel 4 or Sky. The tone didn't really feel like it would be an appropriate idea for them. So we ended up sort of shelving it, really, sitting on it for a while. And then there were some changes within the BBC. Danny Cohen came in and took over at BBC One. And I think what happened behind the scenes was that he said that he wanted some family drama roughly about the age of the average watcher of drama, which is 59, I believe, the average age of the drama viewer. And we had this up our sleeve, and Ben Stevenson, the commissioner, head of drama at BBC, gave us a call and said, what's happened with that idea? Have you still got it? And Nicola obviously said, well, yes, of course we have. Sent it over, and within a week we were greenlit for a series. So it was a very unusual situation and not something that is particularly common. We'd worked on it for quite a long time, but because Sally had gone ahead and written a spec script, really, which is again unheard of, really, for that sort of well-known writer to write a spec script, but she just was desperate to write that story. And they greenlit it for 6 episodes, and we went ahead and made it.
And do you think a lot of it sort of depends on, say, a relationship between an exec producer and a writer to get, I mean, I know it's unusual that Sally wrote a spec script like that, because normally one would expect them to get more encouragement before they wrote the script. But would you say it's more about relationships with writers and exec producers, or producers and writers together, getting together? Is that the sort of the nucleus that makes things work? Or
I can't talk for other production companies, but definitely at Red, we're just completely writer-led. We very rarely, in fact, I actually can't think of a project we've worked on since I've been there where we've had an idea and we've given it to a writer. It's very much our relationship with the writer, them bringing their thoughts and their ideas to us, and then we'll develop with them. We have the relationship with the commissioners, with the channels. We'll be aware of what they're already working on, what they're interested in, what they might be wanting to work on in the future. So it's sometimes helpful for us to be able to direct a project to that channel in a quicker, more succinct way, I think. But it's absolutely imperative that we have that relationship with the writer, that respect, and listening and wanting. It's their voice. We don't want to take their voice away. We don't want to make a formulaic piece of drama that we think will work for a channel when it's not got that writer's voice behind it.
And if it's a talent coming to you, that, you know, young, bright, but very, very good, say, theatre writer that there's great hopes for, clearly not a Sally, so people don't know the name, what would you expect that relationship to be then? Would you expect that young scriptwriter to send you an outline of an idea or a script or what?
I think it's really useful. We will only we want to read scripts all the time. We've got a massive big development department. We're one of the only production companies that accept unsolicited scripts. So we'll read new writers, playwrights, writers from MA courses that will send their scripts in to us without representation. But really, if it's a playwright, a very good up-and-coming playwright, we would also want to see a television spec script. I think that there's for us, I think there's a difference in writing play and writing screenplays. So we would want to see a television spec script. But then it's about our relationship. So we have 4 script editors in our department who will meet writers and forge those relationships. So hopefully when that amazing writer comes up with an amazing idea, they bring it to us, and that's our hope.
And would you say would you say the relationship is really with a script editor then, or would you say it's with a producer? Where's the key?
I think it varies. I think Nicola has got long-standing relationships with many of the writers we work with, and it's up to the script editor to create a good relationship with that writer, so they will then take that relationship on. For new writers coming in, it's about the script editors. My job is slightly unusual. We don't have other producers at Red. We'll bring a producer onto a project once it's green-lit, so it really is about the script editors.
And once the project's green-lit, Alison, this is when you start to get involved. Can you just give a sort of, you know, if you get to the point where, okay, they've suddenly decided to go with a Last Tango or an equivalent, what would happen?
So I come in about 8 weeks before we start filming, and the scripts, especially at Red, I have to say, are in very, very good shape, especially Sally's scripts. And I read the scripts first as a line producer, and I have a look, I'm given a budget that I'm told that's the pot of money we have to make that script or make that series. And my first thing is to go through that budget and work out if it's achievable or not, because really before I come in, as much as the MD of the company has put that budget together, nobody's really gone through it line by line. And then I sort of, with the company, will have a look at the budget. Sometimes it's achievable, it's fine. Other times I have to say to them, or when I've worked in-house BBC, and say, I think this is going to be a stretch. Sometimes I have to say to the producer, we might have to lose a couple of things in the script, but it's very much, we work together on that process to work out what we can and can't afford. And then once the budget's done, it's my job to sort of do all the hiring of the crew. Obviously the director will choose their heads of department, but I negotiate all their deals. And then I hire in all the kit, the cameras, the toilet facilities, all of every penny that's spent is spent by myself and approved by myself. And do you find, because you've got often very good writers who want to be exec producers as well, they want to have control of their project. Is it a difficulty when you're saying, well, no, I need more money, and you can't give me more money, therefore I'm going to have to cut this script budget? I mean, it's different actually when you work for different companies. Obviously, when I've worked in-house at the BBC, it very much is, that is the pot of money. You know, it's obviously public money. So when I worked on Crickley Hall with Annie Harrison Baxter, the producer, we had to go and say we can't afford for it to rain in 2012. But the BBC, we found a little bit more money to allow the rain because it felt that it was very much part of the piece. And in terms of red, sometimes more money can be found, shall we say, if it needs to go a little bit further. But there are other times when it's not, if it doesn't affect the creative story, where a scene, for example, I might go to Emily, do we really need this to be an exterior scene because we'll need a cherry picker and we'll need, it's thousands of pounds, right. Or could this very short 1/8 of a page go inside? And quite often Emily might say, well, actually, we won't lose anything from that scene if that is restaged inside. So
there's a lot of people to bring on board as well, aren't there, really? I mean, you're not only having to deal with potentially a stroppy writer, you could have a stroppy director, you could have somebody saying, I simply must have. So,
I would say from my experience with the writers that I've worked with at Red and seeing the projects we've made at Red, all the writers that we have as executive producers want it to be the best show it can be. And if that means sacrificing something because it means that something else is going to be fantastic, they're very practical at that level. So my experience is that I haven't had any particularly scary moments
I can actually remember a drama I made a few years ago called Reckless, which had a cracking moment in it. We were sort of halfway through our shoot and discovered that the production designer had expected a house that was a main feature in the series. It was written by Paul Abbott, and he was only sort of halfway through writing when we were sort of catching up because they'd gone straight into commissioning. So we're going quick, write more scripts. We're starting to go into production, And it was this dreadful moment when we realised that the production designer thought this house was going to go by episode 3 of a series of 6. So all the furniture he put on hire just for 3 episodes. So we didn't have any furniture in this house from episode 4. So we sort of made up this story. It's quite ridiculous of how, because it was a couple getting divorced, we read up the story that she insisted it had to be decorated before we sold it. And before she sold it. And when you look back, you think, who decorates the house before they sell it? Anyway, we put all these white drapes everywhere over boxes, so it looks like, And I remember somebody, actually a student many years ago, saying, I did a whole thesis on why there were so many scenes set in white drapes. I had to come clean with the real version, which was a bit embarrassing. But I mean, would you say that there is much interference, involvement from the broadcasters? Would you say, or not?
Not from when I come involved. No, not at all. From my point of view,
I would say it kind of peters out. So from the very early script, well, from the treatment idea, which could be anything from 2 pages to 10 pages. There can be quite a lot of involvement, lots of questions being asked, quite a lot of guidance, I suppose. Scripts will be written, so the first script will normally get a green light offer for first script, so we have to get through that process. Again, there will be quite a lot of involvement, both from the commissioning executive and from the head of drama. That works in all the channels really, so BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and Sky. And then once we're greenlit, it kind of goes less and less really. I don't know again if that's something just at Red, if they have that trust in Nicola, or if there's something that does happen all the time, but we generally find, and more so actually with ITV than BBC, or different, less so with Sky. But yeah, they'll sort of let you get on with it, and we'll always have a meeting just to present where we're up to, just to present the locations we're going with, to present the tone, the look of the piece.
Are they seeing scenes that have been shot?
They get
and
rushes,
then they'll get sent the rushes, but
daily,
rarely comment.
Yeah.
We're just in the middle of filming at the moment for BBC, and there's been a couple of notes that we've had at the moment, but all doable and all helpful because it's a process. So.
Should we just see if anybody wants to ask? Because this part I think is very much about the scripting process and the relationship before and during an actual commission. Has anybody got any questions? Listen, if I just wait for a microphone to come whizzing down here. Okay.
Thank you. I was just wondering, it's quite unusual to have a production company accept unsolicited scripts. I was wondering how many unsolicited scripts you've ever had commissioned.
None. But it's not about the idea being commissioned. It's about us being introduced to a new writer, from my perspective, really. And yeah, we've had new people that have had unsolicited scripts sent in that we've met because we've been interested in their writing. So,
do you ever give feedback to people who send in?
Yes, every single script will get given some feedback.
Thank you.
Okay, there's another. If it might be helpful just to say who you are, where you're from. Thank you.
Hugo Smith from Leeds Beckett University. We had Caroline Hollick from Red come and talk to our students, very lucky, recently, and she said that one of the recent scripts, was it Prey, the writer had been working with you for 8 years before that came off. I wondered if that was normal, or if, and if so, how a writer, how you might offer a chance for a writer to sustain themselves, or what recommendations you might have during that process. I know he was an editor, so he had a day job.
He had a job in an animation company, I think he worked. He was one of those, I don't know if he's an anomaly or not, but he was just incredibly focused and incredibly hardworking. He was an ideas man who was just throwing ideas after idea after idea at us. And they all had something in them. They weren't always quite right. He would write spec script after spec script. Again, they all had something to them, so we felt it was the right thing to be still encouraging him and to still be talking to him. In fact, we helped him find an agent before Prey came about, so then that helped him to have that relationship to get more people interested in his work. I think he was just so focused, and he was an ideas man, and he had some fantastic ideas. So, does that answer your question?
Yes. They have to be extremely patient, some writers, I think, and especially if it's sort of early days,
yes.
Don't they? I think it's a tough one. Anyone else? Okay. I'd like to go on to the next clip, if I might. This is a clip from The Driver, which is a 360 minuters that we've got written by Danny Brocklehurst. Let's see it, and we can talk about it afterwards.
that I'd never see you again. I don't want that, Dad.
Where are you?
Burton Wood Services, first one out of town. They don't know that I've left yet, but they will soon. Can you come and get me, Dad? I want to come home.
I'm on my way.
I remember being told by an American producer that if you didn't have an explosion or a car chase in the first 2 minutes of drama, you lost the entire male population of America in terms of viewers. But, Alison, that must have taken some doing, actually, in terms of what were the logistics involved in this, not least health and safety?
That falls under my remit as well, and sometimes can be fairly worrying when you read the script. I'd say The Drive is my most ambitious project to date from a line producing point of view. Stunts are always difficult, especially car stunts. Logistically, we closed Chinatown in Manchester for a whole night. Obviously, that took months of planning with the council. I had meetings with the location manager. You know, we had to put diversion routes in place, and you know, on the night itself, we had to buy 3 BMWs for the driver. One for David to drive, a stunt car that had special bits and pieces for the stunt drivers, and the third car actually had a pod rig on the roof, which had actually only ever been done in Bourne and Bomb before, which enabled the director to get 360 views of the vehicle, so it looks like David's feeling the G's in the car, which is quite unusual. You don't usually see that in drama, because you have to buy 3 BMWs, probably. But yeah, and on the night itself, obviously, we had about 50 location assistants, many of whom were local media students, just helping us on the night, you know, being in every doorway in Chinatown, just to make sure that the public, you know, didn't step out, because those cars were going at speed.
And where did you get did you have local media students coming to you saying, oh,
no, not really, and this is where obviously why we're here today. It's sometimes hard to find people from my point of view. You know, I think we put a few calls in, I think, you know, and we did get people, and a lot of people actually came and helped us from the Chinese community as well. But there is definitely a shortage sometimes, I feel, between what I do and talking to the, you know, to get the students to come and help us, really.
Yeah. And in terms of health and safety, how does that work on a set? How do you manage, you know, sort of before production? What's the paperwork involved?
I mean, there's multiple recce's from, you know, across the board. We have a health and safety advisor, so it's not just on, you know, my head. And obviously, the producer is heavily involved in health and safety. But we do talk about every eventuality, because ultimately, if anything was to go wrong, you know, there would be massive consequences. But yeah, we look at every eventuality, and we work out everything that could go wrong, and we basically stop that from happening. But we do have a health and safety advisor, and we do have to complete risk assessments, multiple risk assessments that we have to send to insurers, and we have to make sure we're insured as well. And we have specialist media insurance, but they had multiple questions coming back when we filmed something like The Driver, to make sure that they were happy and everything was safe.
And how much finished minutage was there in the show, considering you'd sort of closed off a section of Manchester that night?
I think that was a few nights, obviously in that clip. That was about 5 nights worth of filming. Obviously we shoot other stuff during the day, but that was probably 5 days worth. And yeah, the minutes is what you saw, probably, you know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So.
And if you've got a crew that's out there, so they're doing other stuff during the day, probably starting later in the day so they can then do all that, the night stuff. What sort of hours are you asking people to do?
Yeah.
As in, how do you manage sort of people?
So we in drama work 10-hour days on camera, which works out as 11-hour days. So we're called for usually a day would be an 8-7, and that's a standard television drama day. The Driver was filmed on 11-day fortnights, which means we film every other weekend. A lot of drama that Red do are 5-day weeks, but a lot of drama is 11-day fortnights. So yeah, you also, it's my job to make sure that the crew are safe as well, and you know, they're not tired, because it is exhausting filming television drama, especially, you know, 11-day fortnights in, you know, 6-day weeks some dramas do, and it is exhausting, and I do have to keep an eye that everybody is, you know, and you know, safe and well, really.
And it's hard as well if the thing I've just produced was filmed over the summer with lots of night exterior scenes. So the only night time is really 11 till 4 in the morning. So we were working 6 till 5 really. just to get those nice exteriors. You can put as much as you can inside, but really to make it feel like a world, you do need to be
And what happens
outside.
if your 6 till 5 is you're getting nearer and nearer 5 o'clock, and actually you've still not got several shots done? And what do? You all look at the crew and say,
no,
that's when I have to step in.
No, I think you have to make a decision really, whether to start a scene at 4:45 or say, well, we're not going to achieve it, we'll have to move it to another day and make cuts somewhere else. But from my perspective, I think that's really the director's prerogative. If they really want to achieve it, then they'll have to find a way of making that work.
So would you say there's a sort of collaborative gene required for everybody working on a crew? Would you say? Would you sort of?
Absolutely,
100% yes.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so important. Everybody works so closely together. It's such a tight knit community. I often compare working on a drama, and everybody in the industry does, that we're like a gypsy family for 6 months. You know, you're kind of you know, you're working such long hours in quite close quarters that, you know, everybody does have to work together. You know, you have to understand, the director has to understand, you know, makeup have to wait for costume, have to wait for lights. You know, everybody's got an important job to do, but everybody has to do that job and everybody has to wait for that to happen. So yeah, definitely.
And I think that the entry level positions are just as important
Absolutely,
as the HODs.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
there is a hierarchy, but there's not a hierarchy with respect or with politeness to people. You know, I think that everyone has to pull together.
Yeah.
Really.
We couldn't make television drama without the director of photography, but equally we couldn't make television drama without the production secretary or the production runner.
And if somebody's trying to get into that business, into drama, does it help that they've worked in other aspects of television first, or does it help if they've worked in theatre, or what sort of worlds? You know, is it a media course that specialises in the scripting side of it rather than? I mean, how would you say? Well, or maybe I should say, where are the doorways where they're more easily able to get in?
Well, it's really interesting because Alison and I interviewed together for this entry-level position, and we'd sort of talked before, hadn't we? And we'd come up with the questions we wanted to ask this the people, and there was, I can't remember, 6 people, say, we interviewed. And the person that got that we offered the job to, everyone was really competent, and everyone had done a media university degree, and some people had got work experience, some people hadn't, and the person that we offered the role to had gone out and done quite a lot himself already, and just had this immense kind of affability, and you knew that if you plonked him on the floor that he would just get on with everybody and respect everybody. So I think that experience is really important, because I think it shows you how to deal with people and how to deal with a profession. I don't think it has to be an experience in television. I think it can be any sort of office experience. I worked in used car sales before I got my admin role within Watchdog, but that's because I managed to transfer those skills into an office.
Right.
I just think it's useful to have some form of life work experience. I don't think it matters what course you've done, particularly at university. I think that's the thing that helps you to move on, from my perspective. But
I think if I see somebody that's done work experience on their CV, I definitely would look at it a bit closer, just because it does show a commitment and a willingness, you know, that I don't expect people to do weeks and weeks of unpaid work experience. I actually don't believe that that's right. But some degree of, you know, showing some willingness to work in the industry, not necessarily drama. I mean, I'm from Aberdeen, so I had to work on the Beech Grove Garden for my work experience. There was no drama in Aberdeen. And then really, you know, it's commitment, it's enthusiasm, it's the ability to muck in and to be prepared to muck in, and, you know, and do it with a smile on your face, you know, and really, really in drama, I mean, I can't talk for any other genre really, but it's the willingness to be part of a team, really. And, you know, and then I feel that when you come into those entry-level positions, you will and can move up, you know. You know, so, yeah.
Let's throw this out to see whether, because I'm sure there must be some people who want to ask some questions here. There's a gentleman here with the yellow shirt. The microphone is on its way.
Hello. Yes, David Wheeler at Staffs, and a lot of factual in television background. So naive in this area, but the entry-level positions, really keen to know what you see those as being, because you mentioned location assistants and you were looking for people. I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a huge potential area. That's a key question, really. Entry-level positions for
I actually
people who have
tossed
done a
it
bit.
up on the train this morning on the way down from Liverpool, and I think there's probably about 8 entry-level positions on every drama in the UK. They range from a location assistant, you wouldn't expect to have any experience necessarily. A floor runner, again, not necessarily to have any experience. A production runner who work in the production office, wouldn't necessarily expect them to have much experience. Then you've got your costume trainees, makeup trainees. Now, obviously, those areas are a little bit more bespoke, so they might have, they might have gone to, I didn't come up through those areas, obviously, but they've probably done been to makeup schools, etc. Camera trainees are another area, and interestingly, the camera trainee, though, you do expect to know how to wire up. We call it Video Village, so it's not necessarily a straight out of university position. However, on the series of Last Tango we just did, we had somebody for work experience for a week, and then our camera trainee left, and he learnt he learnt in a week, and then we employed him for the last week, and now he will be working as a fully fledged camera trainee in drama in the Northwest. So assistant accountants, another position that's fairly entry level. So yeah, all of those positions we wouldn't expect somebody to have that much experience in.
And if I could just follow up then, camera trainee has to be one of the most sought after positions. Does each major drama have such a position? And do they go through a recruitment process, or is that knowing somebody?
Knowing somebody, yes and no. Yes, every drama I've worked on has a camera trainee. All of the dramas I've worked for at Red have a camera trainee, and elsewhere I've had a camera trainee. They're very difficult to find, and I'm sure they are sought after, but I couldn't, when I've had to look, I've had a line producer recently actually come to me and say, can you pass me on some name and numbers? They've been struggling to find somebody. I often call it Panavision, who I quite often use for camera equipment, and see if they know anybody. So, they do have to have a bit of work experience. I mean, I can't, I'm happy to bring people on board on the dramas that I work in for that work experience. And if they gel with the camera team, then it is, it's the camera assistant who will choose his trainee from job to job to job, really. But once you've got a bit of experience, then you will get work.
I suppose, again, it's back to relationships.
Yes, it's relationships.
It's forming those, and it's a bit similar like with third assistants helping second assistant, etc. This lady here, just if we can just pass the microphone, thank you.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Yeah. Suzanne McGregor from Nottingham University. There was some discussion this morning about the One Show, about not being too arty, and if you're going to send a show reel, about you, not something you've produced, so more what I can offer you in terms of a show reel CV. Do you have any opinions on how you like to be contacted? And I'm guessing speculative approaches would be the norm, or?
I've never been sent a show reel for someone working on a entry-level position on a project, so I don't know how I would really respond to that. Just a CV and a paragraph explaining why they want to do whatever it is that they're wanting to do. We have a number of people that come into the office who one of our office manager will often meet with just to help them guide really for what position might be suited for them, because I know when I worked at Watchdog in a very junior position, I sort of worked out over that time that I wanted to work in drama, and then I'd worked out actually I want to produce drama, but I had no idea how you did that. And I went and met pretty much anyone that would answer my emails for coffee. People that are now like commissioners, like Anne Menser and Laura Mackey, and people like that who were at the BBC at the time, all were lovely and responded to my emails and said, yes, I'll have a coffee. And I just sat and asked them question after question after question, and that's how I worked out what my route was going to be to produce drama. So
yours was sort of very much a networking, trying to get...
It was, but it was actually through one of those conversations that I did get my first script editing job. So I suppose it was actually, but I didn't know anyone. No, no one in my family's worked in television. Yeah. It was all through me just, slightly embarrassingly, but just going for it really, and just sending emails to people. I'd watch programmes I loved, dramas I loved. I'd see the names at the end, who the production companies were and who'd exec'd it within the channel, And then I'd just drop them an email. Often I'd just like work out what I thought the email address might be. I'd just send them an email. But I guess you have to really, in a way. And it was through that conversation that I worked out how to get there. And then it was about someone helped me to get my CV, how they would like to receive a CV. So again, it's just asking people. And I think people are so willing to help and give advice.
And would you say for CVs, short, sweet, concise, or actually do you want a bit more detail about the person?
I think anything over 2 pages is a bit lost.
Right.
So I would say a really succinct 2 pages explaining who you are, what your experience is. So a list of anything. It doesn't have to be television jobs particularly, because jobs, general interests. But just to say one thing actually that I do find quite surprising is when you do meet people and they say they want to work in television, and you ask them what they've watched this week or what's inspired them, and I haven't really watched any. And you kind of go, oh, I mean, I literally sit and watch television all the time. I kind of don't because I've got 2 children and I have a full-time job, but I will watch, even if it's 10 minutes or something, and I will find out who that writer is, who that producer is, who that production
And I
company
think
is.
that goes across the crews as well, I have to say. When we're sitting at the monitors, everybody's talking about what dramas they watched on last night's telly. So it's, the makeup assistants are passionate about drama, right through the whole of the crew. So there is a passion on set for drama.
And I think you have to get that over in your CV, in your paragraph letter, in your email, in that first conversation you have with someone. I think you have to have said, oh, I watched this drama and the writer, Danny Brocklehurst, was just fantastic. I think that you need to know those names, really.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, obviously, which is more production based, I, on a day-to-day basis, probably don't have the time to watch anybody's show reel. If I'm, that's not my job anyway. But if I'm looking for somebody for work experience or for an entry-level position, I would agree with Emily that a 2-page CV is really what I'd like to see, and a quick covering.
And are there any agents that contact you?
Yes, I get contacted quite frequently, but not for entry-level positions, more for sort of, HODs really.
Yeah.
There's not really anybody that represents entry-level positions.
Right.
Yes, I have quite a strong relationship with a number of agents, and that's more from the writing perspective, I think. I'll often go into a number of agencies, go and talk to them about what we're making, what we're wanting to make, make sure that we're on the ball with who the writers are that we should be reading if we haven't read them yet. And from a producer point of view, from HODs, but yes, not from the...
But not sort of, you wouldn't get sort of new writing talment going
yes,
to agents?
Yes, definitely new writing talent.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of our main...
route in to...
Yeah, that's one of our main eye-openers really for new talent, is because the agents will be picking up MA students' work, will be picking up theatre awards, they'll have sort of done a lot of that work and will then be able to help us with who we should be reading.
And do you find writers that have worked in, if they've done radio or if they've done theatre, can they easily adapt into the sort of scripts that you need, or does it take quite a bit of adjusting?
I believe they can. I believe if you can tell a story, you can tell a story in any format. But again, it's tricky, and we would often want to see a television spec script, ideally, if we can.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question at the back.
Hi, I'm Rachel Purnell from City Bristol College. I just wondered whether you would mind listing a few of the agents, the scriptwriting agents that you would contact, just names. It'd be interesting to know who are the ones that deal with scripts rather than other types of literature.
I'm fairly certain if you Googled literary agent, you'd find a whole host of people. But independent talent, the agency, Casaroto.
There's quite a lot of.
Yeah, there's many, and there's smaller agents, there's bigger agents. Some of the smaller agents are agents from the bigger agents that have started off on their own agency, so that's sort of very specific people. But from my understanding, there's a lot of the main agents don't accept unsolicited scripts, but they would go and hunt out those newer writers.
It's quite amusing that some agents will actually wait for a producer to find a new writer and then take them on.
Well, that's what happened with Chris Lunt that wrote Prey.
Yeah.
We introduced them, so
it can work almost the other way. It does vary, but there are quite a lot of agents out there, so it's probably worth getting the list and seeing who, because each certainly of the larger agencies, you're talking about quite a lot of agents within there that just specialise in certain things, don't you?
Yes, yeah, they're independent. They've got 15 agents that just do literary, 20 that do talent. I mean, yeah, they're massive. So.
Another question here.
Yeah, tough area, I realise, but a few of my students are very interested into entry level into script writing or script editing. I'm assuming there's really no such thing, and they just have to write. Or what would you say to someone who showed some talent for script writing and felt that was their route?
I think script writing and script editing are two completely different things. But that's probably because that's my background is script editing, and I could never write a script in a million years. And Nicola once said, I'm rubbish with a blank piece of paper, but if there's one word on it, I can start. So I'm stealing that, and I agree. So I think they're two very different roles. My route to producing was script editing, so you can work your way into that, and the script editing is what you're interested in. You can try and get a junior role within a development department or a research role on a long-running drama and work your way up to assistant script editing and script editing. There's a couple of slightly different routes to get into that. If that's what you're interested in, then read as many scripts as you can. Contact places like TAPS and theatres and ask them to read their scripts and do script reports, is the word. Because if you then go for a job as a script editor or an assistant script editor or even a researcher, they'll probably ask you to read a script and write a script report. So there's much practice as you can get on that, do it. Script writing, write a script and see if it's any good.
I'd just also like to just say, having been in the Red office on multiple dramas, that a couple of people that are now script editors at Red did start in production as well and have been production runners or production secretaries and kind of built their relationships with Red and have moved into the script department from that.
That is quite, it's not that common, is it, really, there is a sort of slight tendency of us and them-y, as in your two worlds are slightly apart, if you know what I mean. And
which I hate.
Which is awful. Yeah. I agree with you, I agree
absolutely too. Awful. And I think that as much as we can, I remember I worked on Bodies with a hat trick up in Leeds, and I was script editing, and I was like working silly hours and out and doing stuff. And I remember the first AD, and in fact quite a number of people said to me, I had no idea what a script editor did. Wow, this is amazing. I was like, well, we work really hard. You know, they really, sometimes production don't always know, but I think the people that Alison's talking about who worked on production had shown an interest and approached me, in actual fact, and I gave them lots of scripts, and in their own time were writing script reports. And again, it's about putting your own time, I think, into things as well.
So I suppose you could take from that sometimes just getting into an organisation allows an individual to maybe go, oh, actually, I'm not sure I'm in the right bit, but I know exactly now where I want to be. So it's a bit easier once you're...
I'm sure a lot of production companies are the same, but talent is definitely rewarded at Red, be that writing or, you know, entry-level positions. And if you are good, you will do well at a company like Red, and you will, you know, be able to move across if you know, if you're able.
Yeah, and it's sort of also being probably not too big either. Probably, I would imagine, probably maybe larger organisations can't kind of cope with it as well. But
and we're all quite, you know, based. It's quite it feels like quite a family company, doesn't it? I mean, I'm a freelancer. I do work for other companies, but at Red, I do come back, and it's kind of the same faces, often line producers.
So you've got continuity of relationships,
and we're based in the same office a lot of the time, which is quite nice.
Okay. Any more? Oh, we've got a question down here. Just get a microphone to you.
Hi there, Nick Bamford, Bournemouth University. When you're looking for scripts, are you driven by what the channels are looking for, or are you driven, if you just find a good script, will you find a place for it with somebody?
Yes, the latter really. Our main thing is if it's a really good idea, then we want to work on it. I think that, again, we can work on as many ideas as we want, and for Nicola, and obviously all of our development is focused at the end of the day on what Nicola wants to make, her constant question is, but what's the story, what's the story, what's the story? So even if a setting is interesting or a person is interesting, there has to be a really good story. And if we can answer that question, if we know what the story is, and if it's really clear and if it's brilliant, then yes, we will take that to a channel and we will sell it to them. It's always useful to know what channels are interested in. It's always useful to use that information to be updating our relationships with writers, and just, you know, oh, I was speaking to someone at BBC yesterday, they said they were interested, you know, just as that relationship really. But no, if someone came to us with a brilliant story and a brilliant idea and a channel had said, oh, but we don't want to do anything like that, then we would still work on it. So.
So question at the back.
Geoffrey Davis, University of Westminster. A reasonably successful actor friend of mine said he believes there are committees in the BBC and ITV who decide who they want on at 9 o'clock Monday dramas as stars. Is there any truth in that?
I couldn't answer. I'm not in that committee. I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, when you're casting a 9 o'clock drama, yes, you've got many names, and really it's the best person suited to that role for the job. I mean, so one example that we worked on with Sky, which isn't particularly 9 o'clock mainstream, was we were working on a project called Hit and Miss that went out on Sky Atlantic. And we'd focused on an incredibly successful female television actress for the main role, and then Sky came along and said, no, it has to be Hollywood, has to be an American Hollywood person for the role. So in fact we went on hold. Did you work on this?
That's when I actually stepped up to.
Yeah. I thought you did. So we went on hold for
I was stood down
3 months,
for 3 months.
Yeah, we had to stand the production down for 3 months whilst we found this Hollywood actress, and Chloe Sevigny.
Which has a sort of instant budget impact, doesn't it, when you do this?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't line produce, I was the production coordinator. That was my last production coordinator role, was Hit and Miss.
Oh,
and we were stood down, and then I came to Carolyn and worked on the case. So that was actually, the being stood down actually helped my career.
But, we all won in the end. But I think that there is that sort of, there was a little while ago, I remember on ITV, this was a few years ago now, where they did actually put certain actors on retainership, you know, for the year. They would say, yes, we will find you so many roles, and it didn't work because it wasn't in sync with what an Alison or Emily or Nikki or whatever might be taking in, whatever, you know, people were going in with sort of projects, and if it didn't fit because that lead person was the wrong size, age, shape, whatever, it was the only time I think I've known broadcasters do that. So I think since then they've been a bit more open to casting, haven't they?
It's definitely open from my perspective.
Yeah. And also more of a reputation you get. I think we've got time for one more last. Well, actually, we'll probably do a couple more questions. Actually, I think.
Thank you. My name is Lee Kenny from the University of Kent. I wondered whether you would advise new writers to try and produce something similar to something that had been successful. So to come to you and say, I've got the new Breaking Bad, but it's a bit different. Or are you looking for something completely groundbreaking? And also I wondered to what extent should they be conscious of the budget and the logistics of the production at that early stage? Thank you.
I think that considering budget and logistics probably isn't anything they should be worried about at that early stage, because it will start to constrain the idea and the creativity. So I don't think they should be concerned at the beginning. Obviously, if they're making something on space, then that will impact the likelihood of a very first project being taken on. But it's tricky. I don't think you should try and emulate something that's just happened and been brilliant, because I think people will then expect it to be that brilliant. I think you should just write what you want to write, because I think that will be just as good. I don't think you should try and copy. But then there's, I think, something that's really helpful. You get a lot of shadow writing schemes in mainly the long-running productions. I know that when I was at Emmerdale, we started one up, and it was really successful. And in fact, we found some new writers for the show through doing that. So I think maybe contacting those sort of long-running shows and even offering to write the first 20 minutes of that show and sending that. If you're trying to get in as a writer, I think that's a really good stepping stone, potentially. So.
Any more questions? Okay, we're nearly at the end now anyway. So
one more.
Oh, it's one more. Sorry, I missed you too. I do apologise.
I think that a lot of students really struggle to know what their worth is, what their skills are worth to production companies like you. So how do they make the transfer from unpaid work experience into that first real paid tangible job that they can carry on with?
I think when they're doing work experience, they really need to think about what areas they're interested in. I mean, people do come to me for work experience and they genuinely are fresh. They don't really know. So what we tend to do is give them a day with the departments they're interested in. So a day in the office, a day with the AD team, a day with cameras, a day with sound. But after that, really, you know, students really should start to have a think about what areas they're interested in. Being a camera, you know, operator is very different from being a script editor, from being a makeup artist to being a line producer. So once you kind of have that grounding in work experience, I think my best advice is to sort of decide what you want to do if you know, and I appreciate that can be difficult, and then really focus on those areas and try and get into an entry-level position. Find out who the line producers are, find out who the production coordinator is, and send them your CV. And I have to say, I don't get that many CVs. And when I do, I would honestly say 80% of the people that ask for work experience, or the last series of Last Tango in Halifax, we gave work experience to, because I probably got sent 20, if that.
So how would you say for production companies, you know, what do you think their relationship should be with universities?
I mean, it is difficult because I'm not a staff member at Red, but it's ultimately my responsibility to crew the floor. My contact details are on Creative England. You know, it's not that difficult to find me. And other line producers' contact details are available on the internet. I think look at the dramas that you want to work on. As Emily pointed out, find out the names of the people who line produce, who production coordinator. You know, use your intelligence, get their contact details and start sending your CVs to them. I mean, everybody's going to curse me now because they're going to get a load.
I was going to say, you're going to get
I'm on maternity leave for 9 months. There's no point emailing me. But I would say, you know, I, more than anybody, want to get talent into production because there's such a shortage in the Northwest. I really struggled to crew up on Last Tango in Halifax, especially in the junior positions. And once you're in, you're in. And if you're good, you'll stay in the industry. And there is a shortage of people. There definitely is at the moment. I think it's because we were quiet in drama a few years ago and we weren't bringing people into entry-level positions. And as a result now, when we're really booming, when we were making Last Tango in Halifax in the summer, there was probably about 8 or 9 other dramas going in Manchester. And there's only so many crew available. And there really is a shortage of talent and a shortage of people in the industry at the moment.
And you can go online and you know you can get production company contact details and then you send your CV in there and then
you'll forward them on to me when I start.
And flexibility of travel, I think, is clearly one of the issues, isn't it? So you can go where the work
I would say
being there
in drama we do work location filming from a 30-mile radius from our offices. It is integral that people can drive, rightly or wrongly. We start on camera at 8 o'clock on camera. You need to be there at 7:30 in the morning. There's no public transport links. So, unfortunately.
Well, there's clearly a lot to play for, and it's definitely worth looking on the Creative England website as well. But I think the RTS in itself actually is a great sort of central pot where you can then, from that point, you can then get the information you need. So hopefully sessions like this are now sort of starting to break down the barriers. I need to remind everybody, because we're going to close now, that tea and coffee is in the blue room. Because everyone has to be back at 2:30 for the session with True North. But most important of all, I have to say thank you to Alison and Emily for giving their time today, this afternoon, and hope it's been very helpful to everybody. Thank you.